Times, they are a-changing. Now, I have just filmed my TBR for the next 2 months, and I thought, actually, I should do a little precursor to my wrap-up as well. So, essentially, I don't want to give up potluck wrap-up. I really like pulling the titles out at random, never knowing what I'm going to wrap up next, and trying to remember what I read when I read it and giving you kind of like my gut reaction to those books. But I'm just not reading as much as I used to, and I'm not having time to film as much as I used to. They're not going to be monthly anymore. They're going to be volumes, and they're going to be when I can. So you will notice that I've changed the titles of all the other potluck wrap-ups. I don't even know at this point of filming what number volume this one will be. And it was filmed a month ago. And we're just moving with that. We're moving with the fact that my life is now super, super hectic with my job. And that I want to still be making content and I still want to be reading. And like, this is a really fun time for me and I really enjoy this hobby. But I cannot commit to it in the way that I used to. So we adapt. So yes, that's why if this feels jarring because it's still at the old place, that's why. And if it feels doubly jarring because I don't say volume in the intro, but I now start saying volume moving forwards, that is why. Anyway, enjoy. Hello and welcome to another potluck wrap-up where I put all of the titles of books I've read over the last few months in this teapot and then pull them out completely at random and just hope and pray they are recent books so that I can tell you all about them and my thoughts and opinions, etc. My name is Hannah. It's been a while since I've done one of these, mainly because I filmed it at a really random time and then I uploaded it at a really random time and then it kind of like threw my whole like potluck wrap-up schedule completely off. But we're here, we're back, we're ready. Yeah. I mean, watching this video is worth it just for that. The first book that I'm going to wrap up for you today is Spy Family Volume 5. So, for those of you who don't know, Spy X Family is a manga about a secret agent, essentially, called Twilight, who has to complete this mission and get to this bad guy, and to do that has to essentially like build a family. And he finds this wife who has a secret of her own in that she is an assassin, and he also finds this daughter who is telepathic, and a dog who has their own like psychic abilities. And apart from the child with telepathy who does know everyone's secrets and is keeping everyone's secrets, no one really knows what is going on, and obviously that makes for very funny, very silly shenanigans, and I just really enjoy it. I finished this and immediately bought 6 and 7. I think there are 13 or 14 volumes in this, so I've got plenty of time to get to them whilst more are coming out, and it's just a really good time. It's a really wholesome one. I know there is the anime out already. I'm not watching the anime until I finish the manga because I've just really enjoyed them. They are very like, in the same way that when I was reading the Worst Witch series as like a little palate cleanser after reading really intense books, these manga are that. And it's really nice because it does feel like it's for younger adults. It doesn't have that weird like over sexualization. The wife is very sedate, very pretty. It's only when she's like killing people that she's wearing like her badass outfit, and even then it's tastefully done and respectful. Here for that, and I feel like this is just such a nice entry level manga that every time I get to wrap up a volume of this, it just makes me really happy that I get to share this with you, and absolutely 10 out of 10 would recommend. Next, number 2. We have A Sorceress Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher. This is one of the books that I read in September and I really, really enjoyed it. This is a fantasy retelling of The Goose Girl, except the Goose Girl is a woman in her 50s who just sees herself as this like old lady, but she uses that to her ability because other people expect her to act like an old lady. When the sorceress rocks up and is messing with stuff and is messing with her brother and like trying to ruin lives of everyone she loves and cares about, she actually is able to use a very cunning wit. And I really liked that the romance is very much a subplot in this. This is very much about a put upon daughter who is like 11 or 13 pretending to be like 14, 15 and ready to get married, and is literally puppeteered by her sorceress mother, who is your classic narcissist. Like, there is so much about this that feels like wicked stepmother, but actually with any kind of like psychological know-how, you can tell that actually she is incredibly manipulative, incredibly narcissistic. Everything's about her. The daughter is only really able to avoid being physically abused by pandering to her mum, and it was a really interesting take to see how that magic kind of twists and how she uses it to manipulate people and kill people. And it's dark. Like, this is a really dark fantasy. Now, T. Kingfisher is known more predominantly, I would assume, certainly with my crowd, for their horrors, but they have such a great knack at taking a dark horror style of writing and imbuing fantasy with it that makes it feel like a traditional Grimm's fairy tale in a way that some fairy tale retellings right now are just not doing it for me. So yeah, I like that this had a romantic subplot. It wasn't a romantasy. I liked that it felt very true to like a Grimm style of like a warning and a lesson, but also the female intelligence in this, because the men don't do a whole lot. I love that the 3 or 4 main characters are all women, and as much as it might be kind of like proto-feminist to say that it shouldn't be like women fighting women, I really liked that it is 3 women of varying ages, varying levels of intelligence and social wherewithal, combating a tyrant who happens to be a woman, as opposed to she's the wicked witch style trope. I also really enjoyed the way animals are dealt with in this. For those of you who are triggered, there is animal death in this, but in a way that I think, I mean, it didn't trigger me in the way that animal death normally does, and I appreciated that big time. But yeah, spooky, mysterious, very much a Grimm vibe. I gave it 4.5 stars. There was only like a couple of things that I just kind of wished were a bit cleaner for my own tastes. Like, and it is nitpicking at this point because I did really, really enjoy it. But there were a couple of moments where I thought it was going to make me cry and it didn't. If I had, immediate 5 stars, as we know, but it was close. It was a close call. It was a really, really good fantasy. Which, for someone who has been on their high horse about how I'm just not vibing with fantasy at the moment, this one, but I do think it's because it's that spookier end of fantasy that I really enjoyed it. Number 3. Avoidance Drugs, Heartbreak and Dogs was the non-fiction written by Jordan Stevens of Rizzle Kicks fame, and I think also married or dating Jade from Little Mix, and again, their own fame, and really, really interesting take on toxic masculinity, because I didn't love this. I will start by saying I did not love this, but I thought it was really interesting Jordan taking accountability and the way he takes accountability and holding himself in this narrative, because fundamentally it is a narrative. And all I could think the whole time reading this is, that's great, but where's the girlfriend, the ex-girlfriend's point of view? Because he talks about doing all of these like really romantic things, and he does come to understand that those are incredibly toxic and those are not romantic. It's just that he thinks they're these sweeping things. But his behaviour could be seen as predatory. And it was hard to read, especially off the back of just reading Billy No Mates and kind of masculine toxicity in a way that was a bit more wholesome and a bit more accountable, I think therefore more palatable. This one I really struggled with. I was not the target audience for this one. I think this needs to be read by teenage boys who think what they're doing is a good thing and that think they are in healthy relationships when they are not. And using like the TikTok yassified language to explain why you're a bad boyfriend, like that absolves you of all guilt. Like I had like, okay, slight tangent. I'm a teacher again, and my students keep being like, oh, my bad, and my bad as an apology, as by way of apology, doesn't work for me, because my bad, you're not actually taking accountability for anything. You're saying, I did the thing, whoopsie. Like, it is akin to me as saying, like, whoops, like, that was an accident, that didn't mean to happen. And I feel like there's a real upswing at the moment of that. So I basically was like, that's not taking accountability. And now it's really funny, the kids immediately be like, my bad, I mean, I'm sorry, and like panic, because yeah, I do expect people to take accountability. And I think with this book in particular, there was that level of, I shouldn't have done this, I can reconcile with that now. And like, obviously a lot of that was because of the drug dependency and other things that were going on with Jordan Stevens at the time. I was not the target audience for this. This needs to be read by those students who think that saying my bad is acceptable, because I think it can become a slippery slope when we don't take accountability and we don't acknowledge that what we have done has actually hurt people or frightens people or threatens people. And in a world at the moment where being empathetic is seen as weakness or a waste of time, I want to encourage you to encourage young men to read this book, and just tell them it's by the guy who wrote Rizzle Kicks, and it's really funny, because there are moments of genuine, like, that's clever, that's funny. Because I need young men to read it. Cis men specifically. Cis white men specifically. Even though Jordan Stevens is not white. But I need them to read it, please. Okay, this worries me. This is an old one. It's a tatty bit of paper. Oh, okay, fine. Republic of Thieves, which I read much earlier this year and adored. Again, have been on my high horse about not enjoying fantasy, but when it's an author that I adore, nothing really happens in this book. Nothing, really. The subplot is more of a main narrative than the actual plot, because fundamentally, this is the third in what has essentially become a trilogy, because let's be honest, are we ever getting that fourth book? Probably not. However, the first two set up the main characters in such a way that finding someone who grew up with them being their antagonist, but also developing a relationship or rekindling a relationship, was just really sweet. And this could have been a selection of novellas, and I also wouldn't have minded just kind of indulging in those like once a month, because it was just nice. And everything kind of like resolved itself in a way that I felt like, yeah, that's done. And I can see why people get annoyed, because actually there is potential for more. There is definitely potential for more. But I will always be thankful to Scott Lynch that he finishes a book and makes it feel like it's actually finished, and not like, okay, cool, now we are genuinely waiting 15 years to find out what happened next because I'm confused and left abandoned. I don't want to go too much into the story more than that, other than it is around politics. It is a very like high stakes political drama, but it is also very much got that theme of like a play within a play vibe, because they are literally like touring as actors, like they're learning to lie, and it's one of their very early missions out as a group on their own, and therefore it meant I got to retrieve my favourite characters who do not make it in the first book and are not present in the second, but they're there in the third, and that made me very happy. So yes, maybe what I need isn't necessarily new fantasy I don't care about, but returning to fantasy series that I do. Because that was great. That was a good time. Oh, 5 and 6, okay. I grabbed 2 by mistake. We'll leave this one here for a second. Oh, okay. That works. I have catabasis, as I like to say. It just makes my mouth feel better. Or catabasis, which is the other way of being said. Now, I'm using both because R.F. Kuang on her long and lauded tour has on many an occasion said that the great thing with language and learning it as a second language or a third language is no one really knows how it's said, and it's only going to be gramophiles that really want to correct you, and she's happy for anyone to say it however they like. So we're going to say catabasis because it just feels familiar. I think probably because of Calabasas. But it just feels like that's how it should be said to me, and that's how I'm going to say it. Catabasis is about a young woman called Alice who is at Cambridge University studying magic and a little bit accidentally, kills her professor. And she needs her professor so that she can get a job. She needs a reference from him, and she's prepared to drag herself through hell to find him to get this reference and to continue to learn from him. Because he is the best professor that ever lived, apparently. Except obviously that's not entirely true, and it really, as it unfolds, shows this very toxic relationship between student and teacher. There is a sexual element to it. It is a very kind of like, she's not a feminist, she's anti-feminist, exploring the toxicity of feminism in the 80s, but also how much vitriol had to be fought through just for basic human decency towards women, which is a time. And those were the things that kind of brought it down for me. I appreciate that R.F. Kuang has said that she likes to make messy main characters, and one of the things she often plays with is this toxic feminism that isn't quite fully feminist or isn't quite fully realised, or she hasn't quite got there yet, because that's something to play with and kind of play out these ideals and these ideas of like how and why we behave a certain way. But in our current timeline, I don't want messy because they've got problematic views. I want messy because they're doing their best and they're just not getting there, or they're not getting it right. So that was what brought it down from a 5-star to 4 stars. Other than that, could not fault this book. I love the dark academia vibe. You really get into the occult of it, the structure of it, the language usage, the whole thing was so well crafted and thought out that it felt like a theology book within a narrative, and I really felt like I came away understanding references that R.F. Kuang really enjoyed of books that I've read, like Paradise Lost and Dante's Inferno, in this like new twist of it. The source material was source materializing, and yet it felt so very, very true to the kind of modern dark academias that we read now that have better representation. It had disability rep, it had BIPOC rep. I think the only thing it was really missing was LGBT rep, and we'll forgive it, not ticking 3 out of 3, but still a really good time. And I love there is a cat in this, and I love there is a swashbuckling pirate skeleton in this, and I love there is just loads of stuff going on, and that it felt like Indiana Jones meets hell, essentially. Like, it was a swashbuckling good time with dark academia at the forefront, a feminine main character who was messy, who did make mistakes and still persevered, and I really appreciated that, and I had a really good time with it. And yes, I still haven't read Babel, and I need to. I know I need to, but I'm genuinely proud of myself that I did manage to finish this one in time, and I can only thank Hannah, Abby and Celine for buddy reading it with me and holding me accountable to doing that. Our next one is Before I Let You Go by Marieke Nijkamp, I think is how you pronounce their name. Now, I am doing a challenge that I don't want to reveal just yet. I've sprinkled little hints as to what this challenge is, but specifically I was looking for a book set in Alaska, and this was one where I recognised the author, so I gave it a go. And then I gave it 3 stars because it doesn't go anywhere. The setup, the kind of fast-paced, what's happened to my best friend storyline, intriguing. The catalyst of when it all kicks off, by that point, I'd lost interest, I'd lost care, I'd lost the will. And by the time it got to the end, it felt so unresolved that I just kind of went, well, that was a waste of my time. Because it doesn't work for the challenge anymore, and it's a book that I've wasted time on now, so... Thankfully, it was just an audiobook and a library copy, but alas, disappointing. Big, big time disappointing. I would recommend you stick with Even If We Break because it's just a better book by this author, potentially because it's a later release, but this one did not do it for me. Now that I'm done being negative, let's pick 7. Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. Fahrenheit 451 is about book burning, which is kind of topical considering it was written 70 years ago. Terrifying. And whilst not treated like a true classic, is a really, really interesting take on the dystopian trope of fascism. Immediately worried this video will get shadow banned, but here we go. This is about a man who is a firefighter, and that doesn't necessarily mean that, or he's a fireman, technically. I say firefighter because that's the modern term. He's a fireman, and that doesn't mean he's saving people from their burning houses. It means he's taking stuff from their house and setting it alight, and he enjoys his job. He really likes his job, right up until he meets a young woman who introduces him to reading the books that he's burning. And that blows his tiny mind and then blows his whole world out. And what I found so interesting was the kind of Greek tragedy of this tale in how everything kind of like spirals and continues to get worse and develops and traumatizes him, and just kind of it's so little and yet so much is happening, and it's so cognitive and so cerebral that if you are Antifa, read it because it's great. And it's a really interesting, fast-paced, classic vibe that I think everyone can get on board with. 10 out of 10. Okay, number 8. The Monk. I have thoughts. I have thoughts about The Monk. Now, it wasn't too long ago that I wrapped up another Patreon read. And normally I don't wrap up Patreon reads in my potlucks because I like to do a kind of at the end of the year, here's what I thought about all of these books type thing. But this classic is so, you know, that I felt like I did need to at least attempt to articulate how I feel about this book, because I went in and was like, it's a gothic classic. It caused a stir. It is about a monk, a vicar essentially, sexually assaulting a young woman. I can see why that would raise a few eyebrows. I can see why the fact that it was a politician's son writing it was such a weird, crazy thing, who then became a politician himself, much like Horace Walpole, who was also a politician's son who went into politics and created the gothic genre in the first place. I can see why that might raise a few eyebrows, cause a stir, etc. And it feels very classic. It feels like it's going to be a swashbuckling tale through Spain. And then it just became something else. It was like two completely different books. So you have this one narrative of Lorenzo, who has lost his sister, he's lost his girlfriend, and is basically rampaging through trying to bring down the people that destroyed the women that he cared about the most. And in the meantime, you've got Ambrosio, who has started sleeping with this woman who pretended to be a man called Matilda. And Matilda is your classic bad girl. She's got the perfect body and is driving men, specifically Ambrosio, insane with lust. And then he loses interest in her and she convinces him to sexually assault somebody else who is distantly related to Lorenzo. I think she was supposed to be engaged to Lorenzo. And he, the whole time, what it really is, and the reason I find it so intangible to explain, is because it is a very accurate depiction of the anger and the narcissism behind sexual assault. And hidden behind the florid whimsy of a gothic fantasy in the way people speak and the way it's portrayed, very invoking of like Lolita. The way it ends. Now, I was told it gets wild in the last chapter, and just so if you choose you don't want to read it, that's absolutely fine. Yes, Ambrosio does terrible things to multiple people. He becomes a rapist, a murderer, and a hypocrite, which is one of the things that the devil has a real issue with. He forsakes God. And the devil takes him, drops him from a mountain, leaves his body broken, battered. He's also tortured by the Inquisition. His eyes are pecked out by eagles. And then he's thrown in a river. Washed away to spend eternity in hell. And that was quite satisfying as an ending. Because having heard how violent and malicious he is from his own perspective, his acknowledgement of that, him knowing that what he's doing is wrong, but wanting it anyway, and the fact that his religious piety, isn't purity, is just violence masked under power. I'm surprised more girlies don't pick this up, because what a refreshing change to see a man get what he deserves. And that's why I wanted to talk about it with you today. I actually really enjoyed it. Crazy. Okay, number 9. What Feasts at Night? We've got another Sea Kingfisher. Volume 2 in the weird, spooky, non-binary, whimsical fairy tale retellings. We have... So essentially this is a ghost story. I got really distracted then. Where the first one was kind of like mushroom zombies, this is ghost story. This is possession. This is twisted. Again, it feels very European. It feels very Grimm's fairy tale. I don't want to talk about too much what happens in the novel because I don't want to spoil it because it's the second one. But just know, loved it, had a great time. The spooky vibes are always spooky, but it's the extra elements of fantasy. It's the extra elements of whimsy. It's the way the character talks to the audience. It's them talking directly to you, the direct address, that is just a little silly. Like, the main character in this is your classic D&D little guy, which I love as a trope, and I did not realise that silly little guys are such a fan. I'm such a fan of silly little guys. And yeah, gender non-conforming, regardless, silly little guy. Loved it. That's all I have to say. I don't know how I feel about putting such a whimsical, silly horror next to such a traumatizing gothic, how one led to the other we'll never know, but here we are. And that means we're on to our last book, number 10, The Rag Picker King. Here we go. She was a chunky arc. She was not read in time. She was not read of the intended buddy read, but she was finished and I did enjoy it. But the last chapter, I said, the first one, Swordcatcher, irked me beyond belief because of the fact it is clearly a setup to the sequel, and it felt like such a prequel book that we could have just started in book 2. And then book 2 started, and it did carry on those threads of like, but what's going to happen next? So slowly that it almost became less of a fantasy and more of like a political mystery, which I didn't mind because that is a genre that I enjoy. But it was just like in this world, and there was stuff going on that I enjoyed. And then the ending, where it all kind of blew up in the main character's face, I was like, yeah, you deserve that. You deserve that because you've taken your good sweet time to put all these pieces together. And then the way it kind of sets up for book 3, I didn't care for. It wasn't quite a cliffhanger. It didn't really feel like anything. It just felt like a sequence of events that happened. And the problem is the narrator, because I in the end had to do this via audiobook as well just to pick up the pace, is the same narrator who does Furyborn, and I tried Furyborn recently. Because this one wasn't amazing, it didn't leave me filled with joy, and the other one just feels like it's been written by the same person, even though there's like solid 20 years difference between them. Just put it down. I've paused it. I'm going to come back to it when it's, like, because apparently Claire Legrand's, like, rewriting it as new adult. I'll come back to it, because this is new adult, and it did have some saucy bits in it, but I couldn't really attach myself to any of them in the way that I wanted to. I enjoyed it, but this was probably where I started to think that fantasy wasn't my vibe anymore. Maybe it's just the fantasies that I'm picking up, but this just didn't hold my interest in a sequel in the way that, like, this did, right? Like, this, I cared about the characters, and maybe it's just that there's a lot of characters, and I don't care. I don't care about Kel, who is one of the key protagonists, a perspective that we are behind quite a lot. He just kind of irritates me, because he thinks he's this noble hero, he's got this solemn vow, but he thinks that can be his only vow, and the only person he can save is the prince, and actually, other people might like a hand. I mean, it kind of turns out they don't need him at the end, and that's hilarious to me. But again, a man getting what he deserves, I guess. So there we have it. My reading wrapped up for another month. I still have quite a few books in my basket, but not nearly as many as I've had in the past. So either my reading has slowed because of a new job, or I'm just getting through these a bit quicker. Don't know. But I'm going to leave that here. If you want to let me know that you were here, feel free to leave a horse emoji. Treat yourself to something from Waypoint Books because it supports me and my content, and most importantly, have a nice day.